Thank you for staying with us and welcome to Buhari Meter. You know, Buhari Meter is brought to you by Center for Democracy and Development with support from Osiwa and happens on this frequency every Monday after the news at 6:30 all the way to 7:30. And I'm delighted to announce that Razak is here with me in the studio. Hi, Razak, how are you?
Hello, Kimberly. Hello, Abuja. How's it going?
Going pretty well.
Yeah,
Great.
I was following Nigerian info on my way in, and I was listening to your voice. I said, "Yes, yes." So it's good to be in the
You were hailing from your
I was
car,
hailing
yeah?
from the car. I was like,
Alright.
"Yes, yes."
Okay, it's
Go,
good to know that you
Kimberly.
came with a positive energy. It'll be a fun conversation, really,
Yeah.
as we focus and look at the overview of the fight against corruption in Nigeria. By the way, the president has indicated interest to run for 2019.
Yes,
Friendly,
that's the
everyone
news.
is talking about it.
Yes, that's the news.
Did you see it coming?
Well, of course, I doubt there's any Nigerian that didn't see it coming.
Really?
Because I saw it
After
coming.
Obasanjo's letter, some people are thinking might want to take a step back.
If I hear.
But what is this thing with, do you have, usually there's a gentleman agreement, one term, but it never works for one
No,
term.
I don't think I don't think any leader comes into power thinking, okay, I'm going to spend just the 4 years and then I'm going to leave. I think at the end of the day they want to use the maximum tenure of available to them constitutionally. And then when they look, I don't think anybody has ever said, look, I'll use 4 terms and go. Even Obasanjo himself wanted a third term. So you can imagine how it is. They say power is an aphrodisiac in some sense.
It intoxicates big time. All right, so we would look at one of the areas in which this administration campaigned intensely, and that's to fight corruption, bring it to the barest minimum in Nigeria. How have they fared in the past 3 years to drive down corruption? The latest Transparency International rating isn't speaking so well of their efforts. It seems like we're still sitting pretty at the wrong
end of the.
But yeah, so I wonder what they will do different, even though there's been recommendations about openness, transparency, accountability, just to carry people along a bit more. Well, to wade through this, help us wade through this, we have the chair, MBA Abuja branch, and convener, Lawyers Network Against Corruption, Mr. Ezenwa Anumnu, with us in the studio. You're welcome, sir.
Thank you very much, Kimberly.
Delighted to have you in the studio. Well, let's get your take though on the president. Has thrown his hat in the ring and going for a second term, 2019. What do you think?
First and foremost, I think it's within his rights to throw his hat in the ring and compete for the position of the president of the country in 2019. But what is more important is that will he be able to give a level playing ground for everybody that is also interested in competing? So 1 is within his rights. 2, he must guarantee that there's a level playing ground for everybody involved in the race too.
Well, that's important. It's left for the party to ensure that people who are interested are given the opportunity to try out their popularity.
Yes, it goes beyond the party. It goes beyond the party. It goes beyond the party to the rights of everybody that is qualified to stand for that position. It also involves the processes, making sure the process is fair and transparent as much as possible. So those are the issues that will come up even now as he has thrown his, as he has indicated interest in that office.
Well, we'll see how it goes. But one thing for sure, to get even more interesting.
Of course,
this
it will.
is taking the plot a little. He campaigned the APC 3-pronged promise made to Nigerians to boost our economy, to at least fight the insurgency, the area of security, and to
drastically reduce corruption.
Drastically reduce corruption. And I think I had a discussion earlier on the roundtable, and one of our guests said that the future election is going to be issue-based. So it's a lot of discussion around some of these issues that they campaigned on, programs and their policies of this administration. Let's get your take on how they have performed. You are the convener of the Lawyers Network Against Corruption.
Yes.
The past 3 years, how would you say this administration has performed in the area of corruption?
An assessment of the performance of this administration in the area of the fight against corruption is something that we must take a look at holistically. But an overview of it, I would say that it leaves room for so much to be done. It's our belief at the Lawyers Network that progress has been made in the fight against corruption, but there is so much room for improvement. And I'll give you an example. When I say progress, progress has been made, like God, the government has made commitments like the Open Government Partnership, which is supposed to bring more transparency and more openness to governance and governance processes. The implementation of the FOI, the Freedom of Information Act, these are tools that can give you an opportunity to fight corruption. There are provisions under the Procurement Act. So what we need now is a commitment that goes beyond what you might call the body language of the president, to making sure that the institutions are strengthened, to making sure that the processes are strengthened, to make sure in order to give teeth to the fight against corruption. So in all, there is room for improvement because there are so many tools presently available for this administration to fight corruption beyond what they are doing right now.
It's one thing to have the tools, and it's another to actually use them and use them effectively.
Yes.
I think some Nigerians will say that they haven't been utilized to the maximum, these tools available to the government.
I agree with you absolutely, but you must also appreciate that the fight against corruption must be one that must involve all stakeholders. It must go beyond the government. And that is why the commitments, there are about 14 commitments in the Open Government Partnership, and part of the thematic area is citizen engagement. And that is what we are trying to do in the Lawyers Network Against Corruption, which is called LANAC. We try to have lawyers take ownership of the process. We must understand that the fight against corruption goes beyond the government. For instance, I am more likely to be affected by the falling standard in education, health, and businesses than the president himself. So if I recognize I'm a critical stakeholder in the process and I get involved in the process and play my own part, it will help for me to demand for accountability from the government. If citizen participation in the fight against corruption is enhanced, then you have people asking questions. You have people insisting, like the Freedom of Information Act will help you ask questions about how the processes are done. The Procurement Act, a lot of corruption goes on in procurement, in public procurement.
Yeah.
The Procurement Act has provisions that can help the citizens participate in the process and ask those questions. We also have the anti-corruption bodies like the EFCC and the ICPC should be strengthened to make sure that this fight against corruption will deliver the desired results for us.
What would you say to people who think that perhaps the administration so far has not only failed to deliver on its promise to reduce corruption? It is actually the porosity of the government has actually fostered corruption, because if in 2016 we were ranked 2016 we were ranked 136 corruption transparency index, and in 2017 we are ranked 148. Don't you think something is wrong with a government that is finding money's hidden everywhere, but at the same time people are still, politicians are still getting the lay of the land to just do whatever they want in terms of bribery and other atrocities?
Yeah.
Don't you think this government what would you say to those people that think that perhaps this government is actually fostering corruption as opposed to fighting it?
Well, I'll say that there is a whole lot of points in what they are saying, because you agree with me that if your ranking is going down, that means there's something you're not doing right. And that is the point I'm trying to stress, that you must build your institutions if you must fight the corruption, instead of personalities. Instead of strong personalities, you must have strong institutions. The fight against corruption today seems to be all about the body language of the president. And if he's not telling us what we want to hear, people will relax. But if the laws and the regulations are laid down and clearly laid down for everybody to see, then if there's an infringement of the law, then the punishment will take its course immediately. So this is about building institutions, making sure that the judiciary is strong, independent, making sure that the legislature they are enacting laws that will strengthen the anti-corruption laws. And by the way, I'm of the opinion that we have sufficient laws to fight corruption in this country. It's just the implementation, making sure that these commitments that we have gone into, like this open government partnership, that there's a form of monitoring to make sure that we're complying with it. These are the things that will help to make improve our ranking in the index.
Well, Barrister, you just mentioned now that the judiciary needs to be independent.
Yes.
But they are not exempt from corruption. Like we said earlier before we came into the studio, we're talking that a couple of judges recently were fired on allegations of corruption. And so if
Have
they
been convicted?
well, have they been convicted? It's true. It's true, but that's
because
not
a lot of them apparently got the clean bill of health after their trial.
But there is no smoke, they say, without fire. That's what they say.
Well, I think the judiciary is also part of the society, and yeah, I believe that the judiciary is committed to the fight against corruption, but we must put things in proper context. And I'll give you an example. Recently, a case that has to do with corruption that is all false and that should have been brought under the Procurement Act that has adequate punishment for such an infraction was not brought by the Procurement Act. It was brought under the Penal Code, for instance. This happened in Abuja just a few weeks ago. And the convicts, about 6 of them, got away with virtually a slap on their wrist, and everybody's shouting the judiciary, judiciary, judiciary. But you must find out from here that the hands of the judiciary is tied. The judge will not come and conduct the case. He will dispense punishment and justice in line with what is said before him. So he is constrained. There's nothing he can do. So if the man gets away with a slap on his wrist, there's nothing the judiciary will say. Even no matter how committed the judge is to doing the right thing, he is already constrained. So what about the question about the prosecution? The prosecutors that brought it under such an act when the Procurement Act is available with copious punishment, about 5 years. Now he gets away with a fine of 500,000. There is absolutely nothing the judiciary can do about that. So when we talk about the judiciary and the anti-corruption fight, we must look at it contextually to make sure that we're not just using the big stick and saying the judiciary is this, the judiciary is that. The judges are actually constrained in some cases. Yes, there are also bad eggs in the system, but I believe that the NJC is doing enough and is committed to flushing away the bad eggs in the system.
All right, let's look at looking at tools. Let's look at some of the policies introduced by this government to, help them achieve their goal in terms of fighting corruption. I know before now we had the BVN in which they implemented and ran through with the TSA, which at least has helped to channel the money to the right source. They introduced the whistleblower policy, which is now an act. It's a bill. Oh my goodness!
It's a bill.
All right, jumping ahead of myself here. It's still a bill. And there's still issues around how to protect whistleblower. Even though lately, see, no one is blowing the whistle. What's going on?
Even George Ubo, who says it's the foremost, I've not heard anything in terms of whistleblowing. When election is around the corner, nobody's blowing whistles anymore.
You think we'll be blowing the whistle around the clock?
That's what I'll be expecting now.
And then we have the EFCC and Magu's controversy around the National Assembly not making him the chair, but I don't know how much that is affecting his work as the head of EFCC. Looking at all of these things, you did mention strengthening institution, which is something a lot of people have hammered on. But all of this just looks like, correct me if I'm wrong, if that's the impression, looks like it's more, let's get our money back to, let's ensure that the system, the holes are plugged, and we find a way of addressing it, the long-term goal, and building an institution. Because you see, I'm just saying that with all they have on ground, the impression by a lot of people is get the money back. How sustainable is it if you agree with this school of thought that it's just about getting money back?
No, I do not agree with the school of thought that it is about getting the money back. It goes beyond it. There should be punitive measures that will serve as deterrent in the fight against corruption. If there are punishment sections available, we must make sure that those punishment sections are activated and people serve the punishment. And that is the whole idea with the proposed Process of Corruption Act, the bill that is being that they want to that trying to put institutional framework for things like forfeiture, confiscation, and stuff like that, so that besides getting the money back, people are not allowed to enjoy the process of corruption. Yeah. We also look at a way to widen the scope of corruption to make sure it goes beyond the man that actually steals, to the banker that is laundering the money for him, to the lawyers that are helping him in one way or the other to launder the money. So if we have all this, and this is the mindset with which corruption must be fought with, beyond just getting your money back. If not, we also make sure that if I receive proceeds of an act of corruption as a gift, there must be a framework to retrieve it from me, even if it's as a gift. So we must put in place things that will help us achieve. If there are punishment sections available, we must make sure that those punishment sections are activated and people serve the punishment. And that is the whole idea with the proposed Process of Corruption Act, the bill that is being that they want to trying to put institutional framework for things like forfeiture, confiscation, and stuff like that, so that besides getting the money back, people are not allowed to enjoy the process of corruption. We also look at a way to widen the scope of corruption to make sure it goes beyond the man that actually steals, to the banker that is laundering the money for him, to the lawyers that are helping him in one way or the other to launder the money. So if we have all this, and this is the mindset with which corruption must be fought with, beyond just getting your money back. If not, we also make sure that if I receive proceeds of an act of corruption as a gift, there must be a framework to retrieve it from me, even if it's as a gift. So we must put in place things that will help us achieve more than just getting our money back. And we must look at the actual cost of corruption. If it's just getting the money back, supposing I have a ward in the hospital that suffered dire consequences because of maybe the person that was supposed to supply the drugs, supply the wrong drugs and all that, and you say, okay, you have gotten the money back. What about the consequences that people have suffered? Some people are out of school today because of corruption. Will getting the money back with sufficient compensation for them? So we must go beyond getting the money back and ensure that we activate the adequate punishment for corruption. Some countries have moved on and are even implementing death sentences for corruption to show how serious it is, because the cost is very huge on the society and the ordinary citizen.
I mean, recently the news broke, I think it was sometime last week, or
Thank you, the South Korean former president, yes,
Jacob
Zuma, even President Lulu of Brazil, his profile is that he did so much good work. But you see, we must have rules, and that's what I think that's the message that the Brazilians are trying to get across. Yet, if there is any infraction, if you have dipped your hand in the public till, there must be consequences. And I think that is the main difference between our own fight against corruption and the fight we see in some other developed countries. For instance, the trial of President Zuma, I don't see it lingering up to 4 or 5 years like we have here. I understand the last time it was adjourned and the next hearing date was within 3 to 4 days, and that shows a firm commitment to the fight against corruption. And you also notice that there is little or no interference from the president. They allowed the system to work. When Zuma was there, he did all he could do, but now the time is up, so the system is now working. And that's the advantage of having the good and strong systems and strong institutions in the fight against corruption.
Indeed, having it well greased so that it can just work effectively on its own without so much
interference.
And for everyone, I mean, South Africa is just a brilliant example, and South Korea and
Brazil. Brazil is the one that blew my mind. I didn't see it coming. Israel. I think there are some issues about the former president of Israel and in a corruption scandal, and you see the commitment, the systems, and the lack of interference from government. So those are the things that will help us.
Because we have been putting up list after list of corrupt looters. Aside from the ones who are already in court, some fresh names are there that have not one day been dragged through the courts or being investigated, and the names are there. You start to wonder about our level of seriousness in tackling this beyond the politics of fighting corruption.
Essentially, no one should be above the law. That's what
precisely.
That's what
precisely. The looters list is becoming a charade of sorts. I think it's very unfair on the country that such a serious matter can be dealt with in such a manner. You have a party, APC, having their list, PDP having their list. I think it's most unfair.
I think it's
ridiculous. It's unacceptable, and we shouldn't have such things happening with issues as serious as corruption. Until we begin to understand the costs of corruption, we might not get it right. But the people that are handling it seem not to understand the cost of corruption.
Is it that they don't understand the cost of corruption, or they are reluctant to work the system, to fight it? Because there are a lot of things that this present administration said they will do in terms of anti-graft, and but the way we see things now, the way we like what you've said now, is not they are not following it with wholehearted commitment. There is allegedly a predilection to looking at the opposition party and fishing out the corrupt element in opposition party, as opposed to actually the tackling corruption across board.
Holistically, yes, there is, and like I said, it's unacceptable. It shouldn't be an issue. We in this country, we must look at how we hold our leaders accountable. If a man knows that tomorrow we'll interrogate the decisions he took and the premises he arrived at, I think he'll take his job more seriously. There is no reason why they will politicize that list as they have done with every other thing. It is most unfair. It is unacceptable, and I think somebody should answer for it.
Is it about going back to the drawing board and going back to the constitution and trying to work some of these new rules, if you will, into the constitution?
No, we have. I keep saying this, and I'll say this one more time. Yeah, we have sufficient laws to deal with corruption, and all we need, if there are amendments, there might be one or two imputes here and there to be made, but generally speaking, the laws are sufficient. We must apply the laws. We have the agencies that are there to investigate and try and bring the people to justice, and we must insist that they do their work. I'll give you an instance. The Proceeds of Corruption Act, the bill that is before the National Assembly, when you look at it critically, you find out that most of what it seeks to do is already being done under the EFCC Act.
Okay, we'll build on that after this news break. Let's run for a very quick news bulletin at 7, which is our last, and our conversation will continue with our guest. Please stay with us.
95.1 Nigeria Info. Introducing Buhari Meter, Buhari Meter is a program aimed at promoting democratic accountability in Nigeria through tracking, measuring, and creating awareness about the implementation of promises made by President Muhammadu Buhari during the 2015 general elections. Powered by CDD Abuja.
Listen to Buhari Meter. 6:30 Mondays on 95.1 Action.
Okay, so we continue our conversation with Mr. Ezenwa Anumnu, who's the chair, MBA Abuja branch and convener, Lawyers Network Against Corruption. Before the news break, you wanted to give us,
Proceeds of Corruption Act.
Proceeds of Corruption
Yeah,
Act,
well,
wanted to build on
no,
it.
I was just trying to make a point that to an extent, in as much as the Proceeds of Crime Bill 2017 is a welcome development, we must look at ways to streamline it so that it won't also be a duplication of efforts of already existing agencies like the EFCC, the ICPC, and other
Code
agencies
of
like
Conduct
that.
Bureau, we have tons of
Yes.
Is that not even a problem? Having so many agencies fighting, doing the same thing. What?
Yeah, the act one will tell you it's for economic related crime, another, but then
They're all
thin
in,
lines there.
there's very fine lines, and you find them crossing jurisdictions, and then you find this person standing up against this person, and then nothing gets done at the end of the day.
Yeah, if you
They wouldn't agree with you that
streamline,
nothing gets done. Not
if you
much gets done.
streamline,
Very
but
true.
in fairness, there are
True.
quite marked differences in some of these agencies.
Okay.
But if we stop now and streamline what we have and make sure that the agencies are cooperating with one another, we'll have the desired results. Instead of creating new agencies, like my understanding of the Proceeds of Crime Bill seeks to create, it's called a Process of Crime Recovery and Management Agency.
Okay.
And I am struggling to see the difference this will have from the EFCC. If EFCC is doing this and you feel there are some loopholes, all you need to do is an amendment, which is actually an easier process to strengthen the EFCC Act and make sure that it is in line. So we might not need a lot of duplication of these agencies for us to fight corruption. All we need is the will, the commitment, the citizens' participation, and the strengthening of our laws, and we'll now start seeing results that will reflect internationally, because it's not about us sitting here and saying that we're fighting corruption. How are people perceiving us about this fight against corruption? How are we being rated? Because even the rating that Nigeria has, you find that there are indices by which it was rated, and which you can barely fault.
Yes.
Barely fault. So that is what we must do to show that we are fighting corruption. And right now, for instance, the Open Government Partnership, let me speak a little bit about it. Open Government Partnership is a tool, the commitment to transparency and of government processes. It involves both state and non-state actors. When I mean non-states, we mean the civil society organization, the state actors, the government agencies, and it has 4 thematic areas, which is one is fiscal responsibility, commitment to fiscal responsibility to show that budgeting processes are open, the implementation are equally open, the citizens are participating. It has commitments that border on freedom of information, commitment to show that the government will accede to freedom of information request and be more open, because that FOI Act is a strong tool in fighting corruption. It has the third commitment, which is anti-corruption, which we are talking about now, which involves strengthening the agencies and encouraging interagency cooperation and all that. And the last one is citizen participation, citizen engagement. So if we work with these 4 commitments, we will, and there is a commitment on the part of government to abide by the things that President Buhari actually signed into, because Nigeria became part of this in 2016 when President Buhari went to London and signed this Open Government Partnership. And furthermore, the African Union made him the anti-corruption champion, and 2018 is AU Year of Anti-Corruption. If we show strong commitment, if there is a leadership in place that will show strong commitment, I'm sure before the end of the year we'll see tangible results in the anti-corruption fight. It's just about showing strong commitment to the processes and making sure that we remove all these issues.
I'm curious, we're talking about tangible result before the end of the year. It sounds a bit too very optimistic, saying that we're looking at 3 years so far. And
it is possible. Well, under the FOI Act, for instance, the judicial review process is summary. When I mean summary is that, for instance, it's clear. When I make a request, an FOI request, there's a maximum number of days. True. For which
in
I
which
can
a lot
get.
of them default, by
Which,
the way.
yes, and there's an extension of another 7 days. The maximum number of days is 7, an extension of 7 days, and which I have an opportunity to go for judicial review. Now, the process of judicial review has been simplified and is a summary proceeding, and you don't have to start calling evidence and all those long adjournments. So we can finish, if we're committed to it, we can finish an FOI request in a very little time. And that's why what we're doing at the Nigerian Bar Association Abuja is important. We have the Lawyers Network Against Corruption, which is a volunteer group of lawyers, which will help the process, because in our interaction with the civil society organizations and media organizations, we found out that at the point of judicial review, there's a problem of cost, for instance, a problem of manpower, and we have volunteer lawyers that can help guide through the process. So that will help to bring more results from the Freedom of Information Act implementation, for instance. And if we score on that, that will help Nigerians' ranking.
Because I know that there's a group, civil society group, that does the ranking, and a lot of them really are very poor.
Yes,
no response.
yeah.
So
as at today, but our network was inaugurated last month, and I believe that we will also be part of making impact. Like I said, it's all about taking ownership. Lawyers Network Against Corruption is designed to raise anti-corruption champions in the legal profession, and the lawyers know, if they are committed to this, if you have a couple of lawyers committed to this process, you will definitely have results in no time at all, even before the end of year. And I start putting that. Yeah.
The result, what do you mean exactly? Because sometimes you have to question things all over again. What kind of result are we talking about?
Oh, well, for one, we can develop a system that makes sure that we interrogate.
Okay, so it's system and interrogation. Because
yes,
the average man, we want to see people thrown in jail. That then is result. And you are not anywhere close to that, are you?
No, we are not anywhere close to that. And it's important that people take responsibility of the consequences of their action. Yes, but it's a holistic thing. For us to get that, you must bring the judiciary involved, you must bring a whole lot of other stakeholders involved in the fight, and with time we'll make sufficient progress. I'm not going to sound pessimistic. I'm optimistic about this, because there are adequate tools for us to fight corruption.
All right. I appreciate your optimism. 15 minutes after 7, it's a Buhari meter, and it's an overview of the fight against corruption in Nigeria by this administration. 3 years on, by May 29, it'll be 3 years of this administration. The president has indicated interest to run again in 2019. So a lot of people will be looking at what he's done, results in the areas that he campaigned on. And we're looking at one of those areas in terms of the anti-corruption fight. Now, you're looking at the process to getting the result, because it's not like a destination per se. It's a journey. It's every day. We have to improve on it.
Yes.
Some Nigerians, they are setting results they want to see to tell them and prove that indeed we're on the right track in fighting corruption. And list out people. Nigerians have the perception that a lot of people have looted us dry and they're still walking away free. So, at one point you start to wonder where you find the middle ground between getting people convicted and setting up this institution and strengthening them to ensure that, because I mean, we had a guest sometime back, I don't know if it's Buhari meter, and we're talking about how countries are sitting on our money, that we need this money is repatriated, and others were interrogating, why did we even allow the money to leave in the first place? Are we sure more isn't leaving the country?
How did we?
Exactly. Are we sure we plugged all of those holes? Can we 100% say that in the past 3 years that this administration has dealt with that aspect of it? Or a new government will come maybe 2019 or 2023, and then we open another can of worms.
Yes.
Well, in fairness, the introduction of the TSA has helped in a way to address that to an extent. And I keep going back to the open government partnership and their commitments. There's you are talking about conviction, but there is this strengthening asset recovery legislation, including non-conviction based confiscation. You see, conviction is a process. Our system here has the presumption of innocence until proven guilty. So we must also respect the rights of people. So, but if we have in place the non-conviction based asset confiscation, the unexplained wealth act that is currently being used in the UK, if we have such things in place, it will help us arrest.
But don't we already, some of these forfeitures that we've seen, and they're tied to all of
Yes,
this?
yeah, but you can strengthen the process and make it and make the citizens to be the ones that can question it. For instance, you know, citizen participation is key. If you must empower the citizens, just like this constitution envisaged that the source of the power of the government is from the citizens, is in our constitution. So in everything we do, we must empower the citizens to make sure that they understand what powers they have. And the civil society, beyond the government, this tax is for the civil society to make sure that citizens are empowered.
You know that you just talked about the citizens, it brought me to something I saw on NI polls a while ago.
Okay.
And how obviously corruption is some seen as inherent in Nigerians, and how the most corrupt outfit or agency you can have in Nigeria is actually the police. That's according to NI polls. Yes, the police is actually the most corrupt, people. And one thing I found very interesting about that report was this: they said most of the time, if you saw a citizen who defaulted on a particular law, and he had a choice to pay between 2,000 naira to get away with the law, maybe a traffic law or something, a vast number of Nigerians voted that they will pay and go on with it. And I think that's where essentially that's where the corruption comes from. It's endemic to our nature. We do not ethically see anything wrong with corruption at that level. Howbeit, we will now see something wrong with it at the level of the billions.
It's the narrative we've been sold, and that is the narrative we're running with. So that's why we insist on changing the conversation.
Okay.
Yes.
I'm all for changing the conversation.
We must change the conversation. If not, we're not going to make progress. The man that takes a bribe, the policeman that takes a bribe on the road, is as guilty as the man that's in the office signing away checks and signing for drugs that were not supplied and stuff like that. So it's a holistic thing. We must go beyond looking at President Buhari as the one that will fight corruption for us.
Yes.
To us being the ones fighting the corruption by ourselves. If I insist that my driver's license and my vehicle particulars have expired, and there are consequences and fines for driving a car with expired particulars, then I should insist that I pay the fine. It starts with me. It starts with you. So we must interrogate the process. Not I want to get national ID cards, for instance, or driver's license, and they tell me to pay extra. I have to ask, what am I paying for? And if I pay, I will demand for a receipt. So that's how it's going to be a holistic fight, and everybody is involved in it.
Well, let's hope that it is trickling down, because it will still be a difficult one, although to scale through, if the average Nigerian doesn't see it as vitals, because it's now the President Buhari's anti-corruption campaign.
Well, nobody's looking at it as a Nigerian.
No, we must go beyond that. It's not his campaign.
It's not his campaign. It's a Nigerian campaign.
It's our campaign. It's my campaign. It's Ezenwa Anumnu's campaign. It's Kimberly's campaign. It's Ayo's campaign. It's everybody's campaign. We must have that narrative changed and make sure we interrogate everything.
Indeed. All right, 21 minutes after 7, and I see the phone line buzzing already. Feel free, call us. We're ready to open up the discussion conversation. You can reach us via telephone. You can call 094600 951 or 0809 5974 or 0803 123 0293 or 080 Nigeria Info. You can tweet at Nigeria Info, ABJ, or send via WhatsApp to 0809 9930 if you can make it under a minute, we would appreciate. Hello.
Hello, good evening.
Good evening,
Good
sir.
This is Martin, first time caller.
Welcome.
Thank you. Your guest in the studio just said something that the campaign is not Buhari's campaign. Anti-corruption is Buhari's campaign because Nigerians are not being carried along. So fighting corruption in Nigeria has to be systematic. There have to be institutions which is already on ground. So those institutions need to be empowered. Not for him to just be naming and shaming people just because you want to win the next election. So it's Buhari's campaign. When Nigeria decide to take the fight by themselves, then you will be having all these market women, you're having the capital, the mechanics that will not fix anything in your car, and they will tell you bring 10,000, bring 20,000, whereas they are not doing anything. So Nigeria has not taken the wall against corruption. It is Buhari's thing because they want to win elections. That is just my little contribution. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That's a home run. Hello. Hello. Good evening.
Hello, team.
Yeah.
Yeah, good evening.
Welcome.
My name is David. I'm calling from Wuse.
Talk to us, David.
Yeah, thank you. I think the last caller took the thoughts
Word
of
out of
me.
your mouth, yeah.
Yes. Why the fight against corruption is not yet a Nigerian fight is because the presentation and the packaging does not reflect the aspiration and the sincerity that every Nigerian is looking for. We all want change. We know that the cancer of corruption is killing Nigeria. So I'm not of the people that say that corruption is our biggest issue. I have always believed that our system that brings this corruption is our biggest issue. The kind of structure we run that gathers the resources that is center for us to scavenge for share is actually where the problem is coming from. So, but if a fight against corruption will be meaningful, there has to be sincerity. We are not kids. It's like calling Nigerians, okay, let me not use it, it's like calling Nigerian fools if we are engaging in a insincere fight against corruption and you expect people to buy into it. It is not going to happen. So when you are done with scheming and getting yourself into power and perpetuating yourself in power, then someday, hopefully, we will have a genuine, sincere fight against corruption that we all can be proud to buy into and help to rid this nation of the monstrous disease called corruption. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Let's hear from a few more people. Hello.
No, thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you. This is divine time.
You say what?
This is divine time.
Divine.
Yeah.
Go ahead then.
Thank you. My fellow analysts are blessed with all for our faith in the name of Jesus. Hello.
Hello.
So the fighting of corruption that we are talking about, if I should say, is just safety and the people in the city. They are just another way of campaigning for their faith. I hope this is goes back to what the life of international we are doing. I think the lawyers are not doing very
unfortunately, the distortion, the holdback, and all of that is not helping us make much of what you're saying. Sincere apology, but if you can call a different line, would appreciate that. Hello.
Hello. Good evening, Madam Kibali.
Good evening, sir.
My name is
Ahmed Alasan, yeah?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
You see, one thing is the system makes corruption profitable. And sometimes
it's not that it's even making corruption profitable. It makes corruption necessary in Nigeria. There must be corruption. Because, let me give you an example today, Kimberly. For me to train a child as a pilot, I need about 2.5 to 8 million naira. And a salary, a man with 5 children, one want to be an engineer, one want to be a medical doctor. To train a medical doctor, to pass through 8 years or 7 years in university, you spend close to 4 to 6 million naira. Then, with a salary of 150,000, automatically that thing is impossible. So unless if you dip your hand or you find some way to make that possible, the system has made it necessary for us to take something. If not, the aspiration of our children may not be achieved. And but I have equally noticed some improvements from this government in the area to stop certain, most especially in the award of contract. I have did some contract jobs during Obasanjo, during Erasmus, during Goodluck, and I have done 1 or 2 under this government. In fact, I have never done the most transparent I've ever seen the most transparent and open award of contract like I've witnessed the last time I did under this government, one in 2017 and one this year that I'm still on. So I think there's a little bit of, but we need to know, be able not to make corruption profitable. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And Stone is saying, why do we focus only on financial corruption? There are all the aspects of corruption, and I guess they're all interwoven. If you don't address them together, nothing much will change. For example, nepotism and abuse of office. Someone else also, Joe from Airport Road, is asking, is nepotism corruption? Please, I need a guest to assist. Thank you. That's Joe from Airport Road. So we'll take this call, and it will be the last we'll take, and then hopefully our guest will help comment on some of the contribution questions. Hello.
Yes, good evening, Kimberly.
Good evening.
Yes. I humble myself before your guest here and before you brought that person here.
Okay.
You know, sometimes I wonder the way people call and talk about corruption. Sometimes, well, it's their opinion anyway. If I got a thief in my house, should I go to the village and reach the name of my elder brother in the village or my village head? It is a person that I got that I will take to the police and ask police to prosecute him. So when people say corruption, the APC is fighting PDP is fighting this. Sometimes I don't know whether we are in Nigeria or we are not. We are from somewhere else. Please, if you are anybody, if you are corrupt, you are corrupt. If you steal, there is no true definition of armed robber. If you are an armed robber, you are an armed robber. If you are caught stealing and every other person sees you that yes, you committed this crime, there is no how you can paint it. You see, so let's tell ourselves the truth. Let's leave politics outside of it and tell people to their face, look, you are corrupt, you are this, you are that. That is the only way we can grow. When you see somebody cheating the other person, you will keep quiet. You know, you are also encouraging corruption. So let's let those who are corrupt, let's tell them to their face, look, Oga, you are corrupt. That is the only way we can come out of this. If not, there is no way.
Oh, okay. We need to have proof that they are corrupt so that you don't have a case slammed on you over defamation.
Just like the
Secondus
is with Lai Mohammed.
Yeah, exactly. So anything you want to add?
Yes, I will still emphasize and reiterate that the fight is our fight. We are the stakeholders. We are the people directly affected by this corruption menace. So we must take it as our fight. And this has been identified across board that the citizens should take ownership of this anti-corruption fight. President Buhari will get treatment in the UK, in Dubai, and elsewhere. But I'm going to take my treatment here. So if there's fake drugs menace, for instance, it will most likely or more likely affect me than it will affect the president. So that's why it is our fight, whether we like it or not. And we're the ones that will make a difference. And then the question about nepotism is corruption. Yes, in my opinion, it is, because you're bringing in other consideration in taking a decision that you shouldn't take, and that is where corruption starts. So nepotism is clearly corruption, and we must root it out from our system, so that we can also make progress in this.
Indeed.
So finally, I just want to tell Nigerians that this is a winnable war. The lawyers have pitched in. Nigerians must take ownership, and we will win the war against corruption.
Well, keep our fingers crossed and hope for the best. Thank you so much to our guest, Mr. Ezenwa Anumnu, who's the chair, MBA Abuja branch, and convener. So
Unity Bar. Yeah.
Unity
Bar.
Bank. Oh, okay. And convener Lawyers Network Against Corruption. We appreciate you for coming on Buhari Meter.
Thank you very much, Kimberly.
Thank you, Raza.
Yes, Kimberly, it's been fun as always. We'll do it again.
Yeah. See you next week, Monday.
All right. Abuja, bye bye.